Throughout the histories of Arda, there have been many strongholds that have held against the forces of darkness through the ages, be that for the elves, men, dwarves, or other races trying to hold back the force of the shadow. Many of the greatest and mightiest battles have taken place involving these locations, and today we're going to shed light on some of the deepest strongholds erected by the Dwarves, and their importance during the constant war against the evils that have plagued Middle-earth since time immemorial. Greetings all, I'm your guide the Archivist. Today we look at the fortresses of the Dwarves, some of their significant histories in the significance in the histories of Middle-earth and beyond, and their final fates on the face of the world. Before we begin, please make sure to like the like and subscribe waystones down below, so more can learn from the archives. Khazad-dum. The underground realm of Khazad-dum, also called the Dwarves or the Mines of Moria, was nestled beneath the Misty Mountains. Renowned as the ancient domain of Durin's folk, it stood as the most celebrated of all the Dwarven kingdoms. In ancient times, long before the sun and moon was created in the First Age, Durin the Deathless established the Dwarves at Mount Gundabad. As the eldest among the seven fathers of the Dwarves, Durin acknowledged his preeminent among them, a status inherited by his descendants and the king of the Longbeards. Legend has it that Durin discovered a valley with a magical oval lake, surrounded by three shining white peaks. Seeing the stars reflected in the lake as an auspicious sign, he named it Khazad-dum, the Mirror Mere. The three peaks were named Barazimbar the Redhorn, Zirak-Ziggle the Silvertine, and Bunda-Shathar the Cloudy Head. Durin selected the eastward-facing caves above Khazad-dum as the earliest beginnings of his new stronghold, Azun-ul-Bizar, the Dimril Dale. These locations were revered by Durin's people in later days. His descendants erected Durin's Stone, a rune-carved stone monolith, where Durin first looked into the Mirror Mere. Despite the effects of time and weather, the influence of Durin I, the founding king of Khazad-dum, was never forgotten. Durin's reign marked a golden age, known as Durin's Day, during which Khazad-dum expanded its size and population. It became the greatest of all the mansions of the Dwarves, even before the return of the Noldor to Middle-earth. By then, Khazad-dum had become a name and a rumour from the word of the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains to all the Eldar of Beleriand. During the rule of Durin the Deathless, impressive feats of Dwarvish architecture were constructed in Khazad-dum, including Durin's Bridge, the Second Hall, the Endless Stair, and Durin's Tower. Following Durin's passing, the renown of his realm continued to flourish. This was not only due to the esteemed position of the eldest of the Dwarven fathers and the expansion of the Dwarves, but also because of its immense prosperity built upon the exceedingly rare mithril, a precious metal coveted throughout Middle-earth and exclusive to Khazad-dum. Khazad-dum remained uninvolved in the conflicts of Beleriand and enjoyed a reprieve from orc assaults during the First Age, when Morgoth required all his forces elsewhere. Durin the Deathless passed away prior to the conclusion of the First Age and was laid to rest in a tomb within Khazad-dum. In the early days of the Second Age, the realm of the Longbeards in Khazad-dum saw a significant cultural skill and population boost from the influx of refugees from Belegost and Nogrod. These two cities were destroyed in the cataclysmic final battle against Morgoth at the end of the First Age, along with most of Beleriand. The Dwarves of Belegost and Nogrod belonged to different clans known as the Broadbeams and Firebeards, distinct from the Longbeards. It remains unclear whether they retained their separate identities or were integrated with the Longbeards in their new home. Around SA 700, they established the Noldorin realm of Eregion. The establishment of the Noldorin realm of Eregion to the west of Khazad-dum solidified friendly relations between the Longbeards and the Elves. This alliance led to the expansion of the subterranean realm of Khazad-dum westwards, although its habitable sections still remained towards the east. The famous West Gate, marked with inscriptions in Ithildin lettering crafted by Celebrimbor on behalf of his friend Narvi, served as a passage between Eregion and Khazad-dum. Thanks to the West Gate, the elf lady Galadriel and her followers were able to journey eastwards through Khazad-dum and settle in Lothlorien, downstream from Azanulbazar. Galadriel's presence facilitated the return of the Sylvan Elves to Lothlorien, from which they had fled earlier to escape the increasing power of Khazad-dum. The entire Dwarven was originally lit up by numerous shining lamps of crystal. The halls of the highest levels were also illuminated by windows and shafts carved through the mountainsides. The levels were positioned between sets of 50 or more stone steps, with 7 above ground and many more underground levels, known as deeps, below the great gates at the head of the Dimral Dale. Each level consisted of countless arched passages, chambers, and many pillared halls, often with black walls, polished and as smooth as glass. Beneath the gates lay mines, treasuries, and even dungeons, while far below the lowest deep of Khazad-dum, there were primordial tunnels in perpetual darkness, inhabited by nameless things since the earliest beginnings of Arda. Very few people ever caught a glimpse of these creatures, and there are no existing descriptions of them, except for the possibility of the Watcher in the Water, suggested by Gandalf to have come from these regions. A significant feature of the Dwarven is Durin's Bridge, a slender bridge of stone, without curb or rail, spanning a 50-foot wide chasm of indeterminate depth, allowing enemy soldiers to cross it only in single file. Another legendary feature was the Endless Stair, ascending from the lowest dungeon to the highest peak, terminating within Durin's Tower, carved from the solid rock at the tip of Ziraxagil. During the War of the Elves and Sauron, Eregion was destroyed, and the survivors, along with the relief army led by Elrond, were in danger of being overtaken and destroyed. However, Durin III sent an army of dwarves, which attacked the Morgul host in the rear, enabling the elves to escape. Following the battle, the dwarves retreated into their city and closed the gates. It is uncertain if the Ring of Power possessed by the House of Durin was given directly to them by Sauron, as the dwarves claimed it had been given by Celebrimbor himself directly to Durin III, although it had certainly been created by the Dark Lord. Subsequently, Sauron harboured deep hatred for Khazad-dum and ordered his orcs to trouble Durin's folk at every turn, even though the halls of Khazad-dum were too deep and strong and filled with a people too numerous and valiant for Sauron to conquer from without. Despite this, its people began to dwindle from that time. During the reign of Durin IV, the dwarves joined the last alliance of elves and men, fighting against Sauron in the Battle of Dagorlad and the Siege of Barad-dûr. During the Third Age, the dwarves of Khazad-dum amassed great wealth through their mining of mithril in their deepest tunnels. However, their numbers dwindled as they delved in pursuit of the precious metal. In TA 1980, their greed led to a catastrophic discovery as they unearthed the nameless terror, known as Durin's Bane, which wreaked havoc, decimating their population and slaying King Durin IV. The subsequent loss of King Durin's son, Nain I, forced the dwarves to abandon their home. Khazad-dum then stood dark and empty, inhabited only by the sinister creature, and thus it was named Moria, the Black Pit. For almost 5 centuries, Moria remained isolated with the Balrog of Morgoth as its sole inhabitant until the arrival of goblins from the north, who occupied the abandoned city and coexisted uneasily with the Balrog. Despite the Battle of Azanulbazar's reduction in numbers of orcs and trolls in TA 2799, the Balrog still remained, and Moria continued to be a dark, malevolent domain. At some point between TA 2845 and TA 2550, and TA 2850, the wizard Gandalf ventured into Moria in search of King Thrain II, who had gone missing during a journey to the Lonely Mountain. In the year TA 2989, the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain, whose ancestors were from Durin's folk, set out to reclaim and repopulate Khazad-dum. Balin, son of Fundin, and a member of Thorin Oakenshield's company of Dwarves that journeyed with Bilbo Baggins on the quest of Erebor, led the expedition. He led a group of dwarves from Erebor to Moria, where they managed to drive out the orcs, securing many of the eastern halls and recovering precious ancestral treasures including Durin's axe. However, their success was short-lived as the Balrog remained a threat, and the company was outnumbered by the orcs. By TA 2994, all of them, including Balin, met their demise. After the Fellowship of the Ring departed from Rivendell on their quest, they had to navigate through Moria following their failed attempt to cross Caradhras. While in Moria, they encountered various dangers, including the attack of the Watcher at the lake and the ambush by orcs and cave trolls. This led to the dramatic confrontation with the Balrog at the bridge of Khazad-dum, where Gandalf valiantly faced the creature. Despite their escape from Moria and Gandalf's subsequent battle with the Balrog, the Fellowship successfully made it to Dimril Dale. Subsequently, during the 7th, a descendant of Thorin III Stonehelm led the Longbeards back to Khazad-dum in the 4th Age, marking the reclaiming of the ancient homeland. Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. The Lonely Mountain, known in Sindarin as Erebor, was both a majestic peak in northern Rhovanion and the home of the subterranean dwarven city within it. During the latter part of the 3rd Age, it grew to become the most magnificent dwarven city in Middle-earth. Situated northeast of Mirkwood, close to the Grey Mountains, it also served as the origin of the River Running. Upon the discovery of the mineral riches of the Lonely Mountain by Durin's folk during the 2nd Age, the colony's prominence only emerged after the downfall of Khazad-dum. In TA 1999, King Thrain I led his people here, assuming the title of King under the Mountain. Over time, they accumulated great wealth, amassing a vast quantity of golden treasure, including the renowned jewel, the Arkenstone. Thrain I utilised the Arkenstone as a symbol of his sovereignty, a tradition continued by his descendants. The kingdom flourished for 211 years, expanding and prospering until TA 2210, when Thorin I relinquished it to reunite with his kin in the Grey Mountains. Subsequently, the Lonely Mountain remained abandoned for the next 380 years. However, the dwarves dwelling in the Grey Mountain encountered relentless attacks from the dragons that inhabited the region, leading to a costly war and ultimately forcing the dwarves to evacuate the Grey Mountains in TA 2590. Their paths diverged. Gror and his followers settled in the Iron Hills, while Thror and his followers journeyed to the Lonely Mountain. During one of his hunting excursions in TA 2770, Smaug swooped in from the northern mountains and viciously attacked the Lonely Mountain. Having devastated both Erebor and the nearby town of Dale, Smaug claimed the mountain as his domain, seizing the kingdom's wealth for himself. Thror, his son Thrain, and a few companions managed to escape through the side door. For many years, the dwarves lived in exile, first in Dunland and then in the Blue Mountains. Subsequently, in TA 2841, Thrain II grew restless and embarked with a group of companions in an attempt to reclaim the mountain, but they were incessantly harassed by orcs and wargs throughout their journey. 4 years later, Thrain vanished one morning, prompting the endeavour to be abandoned. By what seems like happenstance, Gandalf encountered Thorin in Bree, where they jointly devised plans to reclaim the mountain. In the year TA 2941, Bilbo Baggins and Thorin's company embarked on a journey to the Lonely Mountain with the goal of reclaiming the treasure stolen by Smaug. They discovered a secret door on the side of the mountain, which Gandalf had obtained the key for, along with a map to its location. The door could only be found when the setting sun and the last moon of autumn, known as Durin's Day, shone their light upon the keyhole. Luckily, they arrived on Durin's Day and were able to enter the mountain. Smaug was eventually slain by Bard the Bowman, who aimed a black arrow at its only weak spot. Bard was later declared king of the restored Kingdom of Dale. Thorin reclaimed the mountain, but conflict arose when the Elves of Mirkwood and the men of Lake Town sought a part of the treasure, which Thorin refused to share. Dain II came to Thorin's aid, and the three races almost went to war, until a host of orcs and wolves attacked. Dwarves, elves, and men, along with the eagles, engaged in the Battle of the Five Armies against the orcs. Unfortunately, Thorin was mortally injured during the battle, and the titles of King Under the Mountain and the King of Dain, and the titles of King Under the Mountain and the King of Durin's folk passed to Dain. The fall of Smaug was just the beginning of the challenges for the Lonely Mountain. In TA 3019, on the 17th of March, a large group of Easterling soldiers from Rhûn crossed the Redwater River, opening a new front in the northern theatre of the War of the Ring. the men of Dale retreated to the safety of the Lonely Mountain. Kings Brand and Dane prepared to defend their kingdoms. A fierce battle unfolded between the Dwarves' men and the invaders, resulting in the deaths of Dane and Brand, the King of Dale. The strong gates and walls of the Lonely Mountain, reinforced with advanced dwarven stonecraft and smithwork, easily withstood the siege equipment of the Easterlings. The years of fortifying the Lonely Mountain's defences proved fruitful, as the Easterlings failed to breach the stronghold. With news of the One Ring's destruction and Sauron's downfall, the Dwarves and the men of Dale launched a successful counterattack, routing the besieging enemy. Following Dane's death during the War of the Ring, lordship of Erebor passed to his son Thorin III, who ruled until the Fourth Age. During this period, Dwarves from the Lonely Mountain assisted in rebuilding the cities in Gondor and the fortress of the Hornburg. Some Dwarves relocated to the newly established colony in the Glittering Caves under Gimli's lordship. Finally, an expedition was launched from the Lonely Mountain to reclaim the Longbeard's ancestral home of Khazad-dum. The Iron Hills. The Iron Hills, known as Emin Engrin in Sindarin, stood as a majestic hill range in the northeastern region of Middle-earth. This revered land served as a cherished settlement for the esteemed dwarves of Durin's folk. The Longbeard dwarves of Khazad-dum colonised the Iron Hills in the First Age as their main source of iron ore. They established a dwarf road through Greenwood running towards the hills, facilitating trade and commerce between Khazad-dum. During the same period, some men migrated from the east and settled between the Iron Hills and Mirkwood, becoming the Northmen of Rhovanion. Following Sauron's destruction of Eregion in the Second Age, the Longbeards sealed Khazad-dum, allowing orcs to take control of the northern Misty Mountains. This resulted in the disruption of communication between the Iron Hills and Khazad-dum for a significant period. In TA 1981, the last of the dwarves living in Khazad-dum fled from the Balrog that had slain kings during the Fourth and Nain the First. Some of these refugees found refuge in the Iron Hills, resettling there. In TA 2570, dragons began to afflict the dwarves of the north, leading to the demise of King Dane I in TA 2589. Consequently, in TA 2590, Gror, son of Dane, left the Grey Mountains and established a lordship in the Iron Hills. Over the following centuries, Gror and his people built a prosperous settlement in the hills, especially after the destruction of Erebor in TA 2770. Most survivors subsequently sought refuge with their kinsmen in the Iron Hills, significantly increasing its population. Following the death of Smaug in TA 2941, Lord Dane II led his warriors to the Battle of the Five Armies near Erebor, emerging victorious. However, Thorin II was slain, and Dane became the new king under the mountain and king of the Longbeards as Dane II. He relocated to Erebor with many of his people, re-establishing it as the greatest and strongest dwelling of Durin's folk in the north. It is likely that the Iron Hills remained inhabited by dwarves in the Fourth Age. The Iron Hills are located in the northeastern region of Middle-earth, to the east of the Lonely Mountain and on the border of Rhovanion and Rhûn. Known for their rich mineral resources, particularly iron, these hills were once part of the massive Iron Mountains that Morgoth resided. Other remnants of this ancient range include the mountains of Angmar and the Grey Mountains. The Iron Hills are also the original region of the River Redwater. The Iron Hills are also the origin of the River Redwater, which gets its reddish hue from the iron particles in its water. This river merges with the river running before flowing into the Sea of Rhûn. In the Iron Hills, the exiles who settled here had amicable ties with the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain, also known as Erebor, as they shared similar lineage and mindset, and were kin to Gror and Thror. At least one settlement existed in the Iron Hills, serving as the seat of Gror and his descendants, although its name and precise location remain unspecified. Belegost. Belegost stood proudly as one of the majestic dwarven cities perched in the Blue Mountains through the First Age of Middle-earth. Belegost stood as one of the most renowned strongholds of the dwarves during the ancient times. Together with its counterpart Nogrod, Belegost was carved deep under the mountain Dolmed in the Blue Mountains during the early First Age. The Dwarves of Belegost were highly skilled craftsmen and artisans, excelling in both metalwork and stone carving. Within their workshops, they produced exceptional weaponry and were the first to create chainmail. They engaged in trade with the Sindar Elves of Beleriand, supplying them with their superior steel weapons and contributing to the construction of the stone halls of Menegroth. As a token of their craftsmanship, they were rewarded with Nymphalos, a remarkable pearl. During the First Age, the Dwarves of Belegost, under the leadership of their lord Asgal, garnered great renown in the War of the Jewels. In the Nernaeth Anoediad, they demonstrated their resilience against dragonfire, forged powerful axes, and even inflicted a wound on Glaurung, the father of dragons. Despite the loss of Asgal, their bravery led to the retreat of the dragon brood back to Angband. However, the Dwarves of Belegost declined the plea for assistance from the Dwarves of Nogrod in their conflict against Doriath in the Thousand Caves. At the conclusion of the First Age, Belegost was devastated during the War of Wrath, prompting the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains to begin migrating to Khazad-dum around the 40th year of the Second Age, abandoning Nogrod and Belegost. Despite the significant migration, the areas north and west of the Little Lune continued to be inherited by Dwarves. Moreover, according to one of Tolkien's earlier maps, a depiction by Christopher Tolkien in The Treason of Isengard, corroborated by Karen Wynne Fonstad's Atlas of Middle-earth, Belegost is shown in the area Luin during the time of the Third Age. This could suggest a limited survival of the city, its ruins, or an error in the interpretation of these records. In the 12th volume of the History of Middle-earth, The Peoples of Middle-earth, there is an essay titled Of Dwarves and Men, which sheds light on the people of Belegost. Based on the information provided, it seems that the Dwarves of Belegost were unrelated to Durin's folk, the Longbeards featured in Tolkien's more well-known work. Instead, they likely belonged to a different clan, possibly the Firebeards or the Broadbeams. The ordering of the words in the text suggests that Belegost was established by the Broadbeams, while the neighbouring Nogrod was established by the Firebeard clan. Nogrod stood proud as one of the two bustling dwarven cities nestled within the beauty of the Blue Mountains. Positioned strategically in the heart of the range, it neighboured Mount Dolmed, where the influential dwarf road of Beleriand intersected with Erebor. Within Nogrod, the esteemed halls echoed with the mastery of outstanding dwarven artisans. Among them were the renowned smiths Gamil Zirak and Telkar, whose legendary skills resonated far beyond the grand city's walls. The land of Nogrod was carved underground and established shortly after the dwarves woke up. They soon crossed paths with the Elves of Beleriand and built a prosperous trading partnership. For centuries, the trade flourished, and the Dwarves of Nogrod worked with Thingol, the king of Doriath, assisting in the excavation of Menegroth's caves and crafting treasures and weapons. The dwarves travelled a long road connecting the nearby dwarven city of Belegost to Nogrod, stretching into Beleriand and then finally reaching Menegroth. Eol the Dark Elf frequented the area, as did his son Maeglin. Initially on good terms with the Elves of Beleriand, the Dwarves of Nogrod tried to murder Thingol of Doriath in his treasure chamber after creating the Nauglarim for him, leaving him for dead, but they were ousted. Later, Thingol was killed during a wolf hunt when deceitful elves facilitated the return of dwarves beyond the girdle of Melian. More dwarves entered to loot the city once Melian and her protective girdle were gone. On their way back from Doriath, by Beren Archimion and his army of Lequendi and Ents. Despite suffering a crushing defeat, Nogrod seems to have survived the remainder of the First Age. At the end of the Second Age, Nogrod was destroyed by the War of Wrath. In around the 40th year of the Second Age, the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains began migrating to Khazad-dum, abandoning Nogrod and Belegost. The Grey Mountains. The Ered Mithrin, also known as the Grey Mountains, stood as an imposing mountain range in Middle-earth, situated to the north of Rovanien and to the south of Forodwaith. The Grey Mountains have a rich history dating back to the ancient times of Middle-earth. Originally part of the Iron Mountains, they are among the oldest ranges in Arda. Mount Gundabad, where Durin the First awoke, marked the western end of this range. Following the War of Wrath, the Iron Mountains were sundered, transforming the Grey Mountains into a distinct range and a northern spur of the newer Misty Mountains. In TA 2210, the Dwarves, under the leadership of King Thorin I, established their settlement in these mountains, drawn by rich veins of gold and unexplored territory. However, after 3 centuries, the tranquility of the Dwarves was shattered as dragons began to bring trouble, culminating in the death of Dane I in TA 2589. His sons Thror and Gror were compelled to abandon the Grey Mountains and seek refuge in Erebor and the Iron Hills. The Grey Mountains were the final remnants of the Iron Mountains Wall, which once spanned the entirety of the north of Middle-earth. However, they were shattered at the conclusion of the First Age following the War of Wrath. To the north of the mountains was Forodwaith, a region of intense cold previously known as Dor na Derakas during the First Age and earlier. South of the mountains lay Rovannion and Dale. On the western edge of the mountains, stretching across a divide, was Mount Gundabad, marking the termination of the Misty Mountains. In the middle of its expanse, the mountains divided, creating the valley known as the Withered Heath. The range of mountains in the west of the Misty Mountains, still connecting with the Grey Mountains, was referred to as the Mountains of Angmar, representing another surviving segment of the Iron Mountains. From east to west, the mountains spanned approximately 350 Numenorian miles. In its western extremity, the Eotheod, the Dwarves of Durin's folk have long regarded the Ered Mithrin as their own territory, dating back to the time of Durin I's reign. Due to persistent attacks from the forces of Morgoth, including orcs and possibly dragons, the area remained largely unexplored and unsettled until the Third Age. By the close of the Third Age, all Dwarven strongholds had either been deserted or plundered by dragons, rendering the Grey Mountains a mere barrier between Forodwaith and Wilderland. It is believed that Durin's folk might have repossessed their halls in the Grey Mountains during the Fourth Age, as the population of orcs and dragons dwindled. The Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains, known as Ered Luin and Ered Linden, formed a mountain range located in the far western part of Eredor. The Blue Mountains were formed in the aftermath of the cataclysmic events caused by Melkor's destruction of the Two Lamps, leading to the disruption of Arda's perfect balance. Positioned between the newly created seas of Belegost and Helkar, the Blue Mountains were part of a grand chain of mountains, interlinked with the Iron Mountains to the north and the Red Mountains to the east. In the south, they were separated from the Grey Mountains by a significant gap. During the Elder Days, the Blue Mountains served as an unbroken barrier dividing Eredor from Beleriand. Notably, the 7 rivers originated from its mountain range, flowing through a region known as Ossirian, or the Land of the 7 Rivers. It was during this time that the Dwarves established the cities of Belegost and Nogrod, and formed alliances with the Sindar of Thingol. The Second Age witnessed a significant event when the mountain range was fractured during the War of Wrath, leading to the creation of the Great Gap where the Gulf of Lune formed. This location became the site of the construction of the Grey Havens of Mithlond. The remaining land of Assyrian post-war was renamed Linden, and became home to the Kingdom of Gil-galad. Transitioning into the Third Age, the Blue Mountains boasted some of the largest forests in Middle-earth, rivaled only by Mirkwood. Notably, after the fall of the North Kingdom, the last king of Arthedain sought refuge in the Blue Mountains, hiding in abandoned dwarf mines until compelled to depart due to hunger. Finally, in the latter part of the Third Age, the Dwarves returned to the Blue Mountains, establishing a thriving settlement following their displacement from Erebor. Post the War of the Ring, both Elves and Dwarves continued to play significant roles in the region, using the mountain pass to travel to Linden and for mining endeavours as well into the Fourth Age. During Morgoth's imprisonment in Mandos and Middle-earth's existence under Starlight, the first Dwarves journeyed west over the Blue Mountains that bordered Beleriand. The exact origin of these dwarves remains uncertain, but they are believed to have emerged from 2 progenitors of their race, placed beneath the mountains by their creator Aule. These 2 forefathers gave rise to 2 clans, each of which established a grand city on the eastern side of the Blue Mountains. In the Dwarvish tongue, these cities were known as Gilbergathol and Tu Munzahar, but they are remembered in history by their Elvish names, Belegost and Nogrod. Descending from their mountain cities, the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains ventured into Beleriand to engage in trade with the Elves. They played a significant role in the construction of Thingol's halls at Menegroth, and later assisted in the excavation of Nargothrond near Narog. During this time in Nogrod, the master craftsman Telgart forged renowned weapons and armour, including Narsil, the sword that would be shattered and reforged by Aragorn in the distant future. Upon Morgoth's return to Middle-earth, the Dwarves loosely aligned themselves with the Elves in the ensuing wars of Beleriand. They participated in the Nerneath and Oediad, where Asgol of Belegost drove Glaurung from the battlefield but perished himself. Following the Nerneath, relations between the Elves and Dwarves soured. Dwarves from Nogrod killed Thingol and stole the Nauglamir, leading to increased enmity and mistrust between the two peoples. At the conclusion of the First Age, the War of Wrath brought about the destruction of much of Beleriand and its neighbouring lands. The Dwarves of the Blue Mountains were not spared. Nogrod and Belegost were overwhelmed by the encroaching sea, and their inhabitants fled eastward. Many migrated to Khazad-dum and joined the Longbeards there, but the era of the first Dwarves of the Blue Mountains had come to an end. As the millennia passed, the Dwarves of Khazad-dum, who had welcomed the refugees from Nogrod and Belegost, were themselves displaced from their home and wandered extensively in Middle-earth. Over 6,000 years after the old dwarven citadels had been lost, these dwarves of Durin folk, under King Thrain II, returned to the Ered Luin. Although the seats of their kings remained there for only a generation, as Thrain's son Thorond II set out to reclaim the Lonely Mountain in the distant east, the echoes of dwarven hammers persisted for many years among the Blue Mountains, as they had in ancient times. And so I have now covered the content for this video, but if there's anything that has been missed, please share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to like the subscribe and like waystones down below. Nalue Gavanavan. Until we meet again.